So we're at the Poetry Center here today to show you how to make a zine in the pamphlet style. So this is going to include two 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper folded in half together to make 8 total pages for your zine. Most people make zines using collage materials. So this could be glued imagery or glued text. And because of that, because it's 3D, you can't run this through the copier. So we have to make a copyable version of our zine. So that's part of the process that we'll be showing today.
Anyone who has access to a photocopier, we want to make sure that you have all the tools that you need in order to put together your own zine using a photocopier. So there's a few steps that it takes, but it's not hard at all.
Yeah. All right, should we do it?
Let's do it.
So this is our sample zine that we'll be using today, and this is what we call a master flat. So this is basically your original zine that you make copies of. This one here, you can see, has collaged material on it. So this is the text, it's taped on, we have imagery here. And we can't run this directly through the copier machine through this here because it'll get, of course, jammed. So we're going to make copies of this collage text first before we continue and can actually make all of our multiple copies of our zine.
We're going to get started with copying each of the sides of the master flat. So this is step one, is copying all the sides of your master flat, and then we'll be organizing each individual copy on our table over here. So you're going to open up your copier and take your first side of your master flat, side one, place it down on the copier and make sure that you line it all up so that the top edge is along that corner, and then you'll close it and hit your button to just make one copy. So another thing to think about when you look at your first copy is to check the darkness of the images on your copy. And in photocopier terms, this is called density. Now you'll have to remember that since you're going to be making a copy of a copy of a copy, that if your density on your first copy is too dark, then it's going to be really dark by the time you get to your last set. And if it feels too dark, then you might actually want to come back to the copier and bump the density down so that it's a little lighter on your original copy. So as you can see, this was the first copy and this was the second copy. This is much better to work with. The contrast is better. So we're going to go with bumping the density down. We've actually photocopied every side of the master flat. We're going to transfer the two one-sided pages into one two-sided page. This is going to be facing up when I open my book. So this is really the top page. So on my two photocopied sides, this is going to be my top page, and then the other side is going to be the second page. It's a quirk of the photocopier that you cannot just place the pages like this and have it turn out correctly. The second page is going to be upside down. So again, you're placing the copies, second side upside down, onto the tray, and then you're going to need to make a decision down here on your own copier. That's the setting that you want to click on. So I'm going to click on that and then hit the start button and run it through the copier. Great, so our copy came out. This is our first side, this is our second side, and as you can see, the orientation, they're both facing in the right direction.
So Now that we've made a copyable version of our master flat, we just wanted to take a moment to show you kind of a setup of your table. There's a lot of moving parts to making a zine, and there's a lot of papers that are floating around. So we have the setup where we have your master flat here, we have the copied pages of the master flat, and then we have the copyable version of our master flat. Now you might be thinking, why keep this stage here? All you really need is this copyable master flat. We want to keep this for just as long as we're still playing with density. So if you see in your copyable master flat that you don't love how, say, dark a page is or how light a page is, we want to keep this and keep making copies of it on the copier that have the density we want. So as long as you're experimenting with that, you'll keep this intermediate stage here. The reason that you'll keep your master flat is because if you want to make future copies of your zine, and it's also kind of special to keep around. And then of course, keeping your copyable master flat to just kind of just send through the copier when you do want to make your zine. I'm going to say too that when you're playing with density from the intermediate stage to this copyable master flat, you might have a lot of discards. We don't need these, so just kind of have a pile of your discards or your trash pile. That's sort of your layout to keep organized.
We can confidently discard these intermediate steps. So I'm just going to pull these to the side, stick them on the discard piles. So what I want to do is really go back and look at my master flat and see, okay, what does it look like when it's done? And then come over to your copyable master flat, and you want to basically make it look exactly the same. So this is going to be my middle page. It's oriented exactly. It's on top. And then this is my bottom page or my cover page. The orientation is the same. And I'm going to go ahead and then put it back together. So now I'm going to bring it over to the copier. I'm going to place it on the tray. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you how to pick the correct button so that you can copy this in multiple copies. We are going to want to do the two-sided to two-sided copy. Hit the start button. We're just going to make one to see how it looks.
We made a test copy of our copyable master flat. This is sort of a moment for quality control where we can see if this is how we want our zine to look. You'll see here that when you make a copy of your copy, you'll inevitably have graininess. This is a part of the zine aesthetic. More what you want to look at for your quality control step here is to see if this is in fact the density you want. You want it to be lighter or darker, you can make those decisions now.
Okay, so we had success with our first copy. We checked the graininess, we're good with it, looks fine. So we feel good about this process. We're going to make more copies now. So again, we're going to take the same exact original copyable master flat, place it onto the tray, and then again we're going to check to see that our button is pressed for the 2 to 2-sided. Ensure that you've selected the collate feature, which just means that you're going to keep all of the pages of the zine together when you copy them. On this copier, it's called sort versus stack. And then now, instead of just hitting the start button, we're also going to click a number, a quantity number that we want to make copies of. So I chose 15. And then we would just hit the start button, and then you'll start seeing the copies start rolling through and landing onto your discharge tray over here.
So we have our copies of our zine. We're going to take them here to our folding table, and we're going to start separating them out into our individual zines to fold. So when they come out collated, they're very conveniently stacked in the form that the zine is organized, so it's quite easy. We have 2 copies here, and we just separate them, and we have basically our zines here laid out. So I'm going to, of course, make sure the pieces of paper are flush with one another. And using a ruler to set in the middle of your zine can be helpful to make sure that this is a neat, clean process. But yeah, make sure your corners are lined up here before you crease. Zine 1. And do the same with your other set of copies. And then you have 2 zines.
So we're pretty much done. We just want to show you the final piece. Here's our finished zine, and you'll notice that it looks amazing. The last step is really to make a decision about how you want to physically bind the pages together so that they don't fall apart when you pass them out to someone. And you really have 2 options. One is to staple them together, and you need a special kind of stapler for that. A typical size stapler is not long enough to get from this edge into the center, or, and this is probably our favorite option, is to bind the pages together using a book binding method. You can also just use a really heavy sewing needle and some thick twine or yarn or whatever kind of string. You could even use really thin doubled up string from a regular sewing kit. Poke your needle through and then switch to the other side, and then you'll have your strings kind of pulled up through the holes, and then you'll just kind of tie off this string at the center and cut off however much of the tails that you want to leave.